Добрый день.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good afternoon. Today is the 19th of January 2021, 14:00 Moscow time. Let me start the session of the academic committee dedicated to the defense of dissertation of Uliana A Udavikhina, seeking an academic degree of kind of psychological sciences and the degree field 5.3.5 social psychology, political and economic psychology on the topic socio-psychological features of mediators professional activity. According to the act of the academic secretary of St. Petersburg University, Alexander Valentinovich Gnetov. Well, we need to announce a technical break number one, because one of the members of the Dissertation committee is not online with us. Technical break, please.
Александр.
Так, внимание, будем продолжать.
We're going to continue now. Technical break number 1 is closed. The time is 14:10. We continue our session. By the act of the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University, Alexander Gnetov, dated the 12th of November 2021, I, Olga Sergeyevna Dayneka, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Political Psychology at St. Petersburg University, was appointed chairperson of this dissertation committee. Let me introduce other members of the dissertation committee. Елена Леонидовна Солдатова, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Faculty of Psychology, St. Petersburg University. She is in charge of the training program in the specialisms degree in psychology.
Участие. Нестик Тимофей Александрович, доктор психологических наук, профессор Российской академии наук, заведующий лабораторией социальной и экономической психологии Института психологии Российской академии наук.
The Institute, can you hear and see us? Alexander Nicolaivic Tatarko, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor, Deputy Head of the Center of Socio-cultural Studies, National Research University High School of Economics. Can you see and hear us? Yes, I can hear and see you. Kristi Koev, Doctor of Psychological Science, Professor, Tartu University, Estonia. Kristi, can you hear and see us? Yes? Yeah, we just checked. Also, the academic advisor of the dissertation, author, head of the Department of Social Psychology, Svetlana Zakhotovna Gurieva, is present here. To improve the quality of communication, please, those who are not in the room with us, leave your switch off your microphones, but don't switch off your telephones for emergency connection. Just to remind you that there's a simultaneous interpretation between English and Russian accompanying a live broadcast on the website of St. Petersburg University of this session. On the web page of the dissertation, there's an email where you can send messages with questions that relate to the presentation of the candidate or the text of the dissertation. No questions that have no relation to the academic discussion relating to this dissertation, or anonymous questions, or questions that have no affiliation of the author will be read. And in accordance with the procedure of in St. Petersburg University of awarding academic degrees of Candidate of Sciences and Doctor of Sciences, the session of a dissertation committee is deemed legitimate if not less than 2/3 of the established membership of the dissertation committee, but not fewer than 4 people are present. And our dissertation committee consists of 5 people. All 5 people are present, including 3 in the online mode with us. The quorum is there. Please, I would like to ask a member of the dissertation committee support office of St. Petersburg University start a registration list. We will have, let me go over the agenda. We'll have a meeting of approximately 2 hours. Item number 1, short presentation of the chairperson about the paperwork submitted by the candidate, 5 minutes. A short presentation of the candidate, 15 minutes, covering key issues tackled in the dissertation. Third, questions to the defendant, strictly on the presentation, not more than 2 minutes per question. The candidate will answer all of them, not more than 5 minutes for all questions. Then all members of the dissertation committee will have 10 minutes to express their views of the dissertation, borrowed from the reviews, of course, and then the chairperson will have 10 minutes again to do the same. Then the candidate will answer critical remarks and questions, not more than 20 minutes for all. Then the open floor discussion, 2 minutes per speaker, but with concrete questions on the topic of the research. And in order to be able to speak, you have to enter your name in the logbook and sign and designate your affiliation name, etc. Number 9, the chairperson will present questions, read questions that have been sent by email to the dissertation committee. Questions that would take more than 2 minutes to read will not be read. The candidate will have 2 minutes per questions to answer these questions, and then the academic advisor will have 3 minutes to talk about the candidate, and then the dissertation committee members will have, if they need it, a break of 5 minutes without a broadcast to deliberate on the verdict, and then open roll call vote, and the decision on awarding or non-awarding of the academic degree is taken, and the concluded statement of the candidate not more than 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions or critical remarks as to the agenda? If there are no objections, then I will go over the agenda. Please turn off the sound on your mobile phones. That's everybody who is in the room here, offline, but those are online with us. Please keep your phones ready for emergency communication. So I am starting the first item on the agenda, a short presentation of the paperwork. The dissertation of Uliana A, Udavikhina, seeking academic degree of Canada Psychological Sciences in the degree field 5.3.5, Social Psychology, Political and Economic Psychology, on the topic social psychological features of mediators' professional activities, was accepted for defense by the Act of Academic Secretary on the 25th, 2021. Uliana Andreevna Udavikhina wrote her dissertation in St. Petersburg University as a candidate, as a postgraduate student, and the Doctor of Psychological Sciences professor, head of the Department of Social Psychology, Svetlana Zakotovna Gurieva, served as her academic advisor. A number of publications, 3 publications in journals approved by the Ministry of Science and Education of the Russian Federation, and Web of Science and Scopus publications too. All the paperwork that I've referred to is held in the personal file of the candidate and is available from the member of the dissertation committee support office. If you deem it necessary, do you think that we need to go over all the documentation that that has been submitted. Have any questions? Any questions as to the documents? No need. Then the next one is very important item on the agenda: a short presentation of the dissertation. Dear members of the dissertation committee, dear chairperson, allow me to present to your attention my study on the topic socio-psychological features of the professional activity of mediator. This work was written under the guidance of the supervision of Uliana A, Doctor Psychology Professor. The relevance of the research, it is connected with the fact that most sites characterized by the exacerbation of various kinds of conflicts. Mediation is one of the types of alternative dispute resolution in which a neutral intermediary assists the parties to the conflicts in developing a mutually beneficial solution. At the moment, the academic literature is dominated by the definition of mediation as a process of procedure which is built according to a certain algorithm. Also, much attention spent to the description of the functions and personal qualities of the mediators. We, at the same time, in our opinion, the social-psychological aspect is not widely disclosed to the studies of the mission. Do we need another technical break? One member of the dissertation committee is offline. 20. The technical break number 2 is closed because the member is online. So let me continue. We found that in an efficient number of studies, the features of interpersonal relation between mediators and participants in mediation. Thus, a study aimed at identifying the socio-psychological characteristics of the professional activities of mediators, as well as the characteristics of interpersonal relations between mediators and participants in mediation, is relevant from the point of view of modern theory and practice. The scientific novelty of the research, the scientific novelty of the study owes its significance to the fact that for the first time in the framework of socio-psychological research, the study of the process of mediation as a socio-psychological phenomenon, including various approaches, styles of conducting mediation, levels of emotive intelligence, emotional intelligence, the type of interpersonal relation, mediator-client, is substantiated. I identified and studied the socio-psychological features of the mediator's professional activity in the context of interpersonal relations with mediation participation. Established the general and scientific patterns that are manifested in the professional activities of the mediator, the ready-to-work experience, commitment to a professional approach to mediation. The practical significance, the results, and the results of the study can be used to create and improve professional development programs in the field of mediators. As a result of the study, we actually already use in this department of social psychology of St. Petersburg University and the mediation service of the contact center. Purpose and object of study in our work, mediation is understood as socio-psychological phenomenon that should be considered in a broad and narrow sense, not only as a procedure of process that includes a regulated sequence of actions, but as a phenomenon that includes the features of building and of a specific interaction in a social group, which with inherent group effects depending on the stages of conflict development. The object of the study was professional mediators and participants in mediation. The subject of the study is socio-psychological features of mediators' professional activity and the individual psychological characteristics of the mediators. The main hypothesis of the study was that there are socio-psychological features of the mediators' professional activities manifested in various styles of mediation, commitment to different mediation approaches, severity of emotional intelligence parameters, personality orientation in interpersonal relations of mediators and participants in mediation. Also, there are private hypotheses of I will pass now because they're on the slide. We defend the following provisions. Mediation is understood as a socio-psychological phenomenon manifested in a specific as the mediator's professional activity and in their individual and personal characteristics, as well as the professional and interpersonal relation of the mediator and mediation participants. Mediation, number two, mediation as a socio-psychological film can be considered in the context of the relation between the mediator and participants in mediation, which a professional approach and preferred styles of negotiating with a focus on dominance and or friendliness are manifested. Number three, socio-psychological features of the mediator's activity are manifested in the professional approach to mediation, implemented in the styles of mediation manifested at different levels of subjective success and satisfaction of the mediator, as well as in terms of subjective effectiveness and the type of building professional and personal relation mediator-client. Characterized as identity and mismatch of images in terms of I real, I ideal, and other. Number four, there are general and specific features in the professional activity of a mediator. Common features are related to work experience, commitment to a professional approach to mediation. Specific features are manifested in the socio-psychological characteristics of the personality of the mediator, participants in mediation, indicators of emotional intelligence, and types of professional and interpersonal relation mediator-client. Number five, the indicator of subjective success in the mediator's professional activities is associated with internal features such as personal qualities, communication skills, and behavioral strategies aimed at complying with norms and providing support to the client, and external features, socio-psychological characteristics of mediation participants and the influence of external circumstances, lack of time, knowledge, support, information, etc. The study sample consists of two groups. Mediators aged 21 to 63 years old from different regions of the Russian Federation with practical experience as mediators and negotiations for at least 1 year. Number two, adult citizens of the Russian Federation who are at least once turned to the service of a mediator when resolved conflict situation. A total of 198 people took part in the study. The methods. The methods are on the slide. I will not go over them. The table presents a generalized analysis. Let's turn to the lens to the results. The characteristic of mediators of various specializations were carried out using a one-way analysis of variance ANOVA. It can be noted that the sample of mediators specializing in family disputes is made of young people with an income below the average, work experience for 1 to 3 years, who work at a fairly intensive rhythm, which on the one hand allows them to feel their professional self-realization, and on the other hand introduces self-esteem of subjective success, so satisfaction and involvement in a work. A high work intensity combined with low job satisfaction can be a predictor of professional burnout. Mediators in the field of education are represented by people in the older generation with an average income with work experience from 1 to 3 years, but with significantly lower intensity work, as mediators who note average satisfaction with their work but consider themselves deficiently involved in their professional activity of mediators and the activity itself to resolve conflict. Mediators specializing in commercial disputes are also represented by people of mature age with work experience of 3 to 5 years and relative slow number of completed cases, in general, and are moderately satisfied with their effectiveness as mediators, professional self-realization, and involvement in work. The sample of mediators specializing in the settlement of conflicts in the field of criminal offenses is represented by experienced professionals with 5 to 10 years of experience who highly appreciate the effectiveness of their work, inspiration from work, and professional self-realization. Mediators with experience in conflict resolution in various fields also have a fairly large experience of resolved cases for 3 to 5 years and adhere to the average estimates of the above indicates. The data obtained are consistent with the study of Kornieva and Rudakova, according to which more experienced mediators feel more successful due to the past stage of adaptation to the profession and development of professional important qualities to the process of professional activity. And then next, the slide represents the results of a comparative analysis, difference of characteristics of personality orientation between mediators and participants in mediation, it can be noted that there is a significant discrepancy between the real and ideal vision of the I image for both mediators and participants in mediation, which can become a prerequisite for interpersonal conflict. For participants in mediation, this discrepancy is observed on all scales except for the scales dependence and dominance. At the same time, mediation participants want to ideally see themselves as more dominant. Among mediators, mismatch is noted relatively less frequently. It occurs only on 3 scales: dominance, benevolence, and dependence. We associate mismatch on the dominance scale with the desire for personal significance, and on the goodwill and dependence scales with the desire to establish trusting contact and provide support regardless of the situation person gets towards people. At the same time, both mediators and participants in mediation ideally see a decrease in scores in most scales compared to their real vision of themselves. This may indicate desire to reduce or mute the severity of emotions in the personal relations for both samples. We also compared mediators' perceptions of themselves, the category I real, and mediators' perceptions of the mediator, categories other, and vice versa. Participants in mediation perceive the mediator on the one hand as less competitive and independent, less stubborn and persistent, and on the other hand, less inclined to agree with someone's opinion, be convenient for everyone, and be gentle and compassionate than they themselves consider themselves mediators. Mediators perceive mediation participants as less compliant, emotionally restrained, and focus only on their own interests and needs, for non-mediation participants consider themselves. To test the assumption, the discrepancy of the images in the image of the mediator participant and mediator themselves may be associated with obstacles in establishing a trusting contact. 1,679 cases presented in the reporting documents, those were analyzed. Mediation of the contact center of the period 27 to 2020. Based on the data, it can be concluded that in those cases where either reconciliation was achieved, more intensive integrated work of the mediator was organized. You see that we also did the content analysis. The special attention was drawn to increase number of requests for psychological services, and the experts tend to explain success in professional activity of mediators by internal facts such as personal qualities, communication skills, and behavioral strategies. At the same time, failure in work is explained by mediators not only by internal factors but also by external ones, personal qualities of mediation participants, and external circumstances. You see that mediators we found that mediators of different mediation styles differ in certain subscales of emotional intelligence. Mediators who use a formal and managerial style of mediation are characterized by high scores on the management of their emotion scales. There is also a tendency of mediators of the business style of mediation to be characterized by low values on the understanding their emotion scale. Psychotherapeutic and emphatic style mediators empathic style mediators are characterized by high values on the understanding of other people's emotion scales, which is also reflected in the high values of the interpersonal emotional intelligence integral scale. The result obtained allowed us to form a theoretically substantiated and empirically proven socio-psychological model of the mediator's professional activity. The presented socio-psychological model of the professional activities described the relationship with 6 key characteristics described in the study: the level of subjective job satisfaction, the level of subjective success, preferred mediation approach and mediation style, as well as the emotional intelligence and the nature of interpersonal relationships mediator-client. We made certain conclusions. We have no time to read through. You have them on the on the slide there, and just the conclusions, the concluding concluding statement. Mediation is understood as a socio-psychological phenomenon manifested in the specifics of the mediator's professional activity and his individual and personal characteristics, as well as in the professional interpersonal relations of the mediator and mediator and participants. The profiles of mediators are defined using different approaches to their work, characterized by certain socio-psychological and personal characteristics. Number 3, mediators have different styles of conducting mediation based on the modified empirical classification of Azarnova, differ in certain subscales of emotional intelligence. Number 4, mediation as a socio-psychological phenomenon can be considered in the context of the relation between the mediator and participants in mediation, in which a professional approach and preferred styles of negotiating with a focus on dominance and or friendliness are manifested. Number 5, professional interpersonal relations mediator-client are characterized by both identity and mismatch of images according to the parents I, real, I, ideal, and other. And 6, evaluation of professional activities differs between beginners and more experienced mediators. And number 7, success in professional activity is explained by the mediators by internal factors and failure in work, both internal and external. And the conclusion is, for successful work as a mediator in resolving conflict in a variety of areas, basic higher education and refresher course in mediation where specialists learn the negotiation algorithm are not enough. For a specialist who wants to fulfill themselves in this professional field, it's important to have a deep understanding of their personal qualities, professional experience, and conscious attitudes towards people around them, and understanding of the mechanism of interaction with them and the process that arises in social groups. Thank you very much. All members of the Dissertation Council, this question: do we have any questions to the candidate strictly on the presentation that you just heard? Do you have any questions? No. That means that outside what you have in the reviews. Soldata Leonidovna, I have a question. You, mediators, are from 21-year-old, but in the professional standard bylaw, the restriction is 25 years old, lower threshold. Why did you take 21-year-olds with the people under 25? Thank you very much for your question. In law, yes, professional mediators can be only 25 and over, and with a high degree, with the high education. But there are specialists who are younger in the center, who worked in the center for over 1 year, and I decided to include them in our study, not even which is outside the legislation. Yes. Thank you very much. Any other questions from members of the Dissertation Committee? No questions? Okay. Well then, all the other questions will be in the reviews, I'm sure. And please take a seat then, Uliana Andreevna. And we are now turning to the members of the Dissertation Committee, and then after that the candidate will answer the critical remarks and questions. And I would like to remind you that the candidate can answer after each review or after all the reviews are voiced. I suggest that she does that after all the reviews. Is this okay? All right. Then we will hear all the reviews from members of the Dissertation Council. All the reviews have been published on the website, and are available for prior accessible, and therefore I suggest that only the critical or the key comments, including critical remarks and questions, should be read here. No external reviews have been submitted, and therefore we only have the reviews that the members of the dissertation committees have submitted. So now we'll start with Елена Leonidovna Soldatova, please. Thank you. Just a few words, dear colleagues, about the relevance and about the results, the findings, and then I'll turn to the critical remark. The dissertation thesis treats a very relevant topic. Recently, it's been part of many fields and focus of many fields. This is leads a talk about the necessity to create a professional mediation service and accentuates the participation of different the practice of pre-trial conflict resolution calls for a professional institution of mediation, and outlines the relevance of this research of the psychological foundation and context of the interaction between the participants of mediation and the effectiveness of the process of mediation in different social spheres. The definition of mediation is not universally agreed upon because it's multidisciplinary, and usually it's treated as a process, a style, and a technical context. And the category of mediation has many times become an object of studies in European psychology and recently in Russian psychology. In the second chapter, there's a program of research, and it follows logically from the theoretical part. The diagnostic methods are diverse, and I have to note that they are characterized by novelty and originality, and which manifests that the author has competencies, and we should note that the methods are chosen well, and the conclusions are valid and convincing. The empirical research is in the third chapter, and the author finds new empirical data in the structure of this phenomenon, and including a broader context of social interaction, or including in broader context of social interaction. And I hope that Uliana Andreevna will have even a more prognostic view of what can be done in this area. And I would just have to note that this is a research work of many years in the making, and the 5 years at least it's taken to complete, starting with a master's degree study of the candidate, and so I would like to note some drawbacks, of course, and some questions that need clarification. The first one, it's obvious that the first chapter has a large spectrum of materials on the problem and sources, but there's a problem of some citations. For example, the open access document of the Ministry of Labor, Professional Standard of Mediator. You cite that through the citing a paper, which is strange. And then again, the Code of Mediators of Russia, again an open access document, again is cited through the work of an author, and this is legally not very good. And then also I would like to take issue with this definition. The psychology is a specialist in the area of psychology who can undertake both scientific research of the psychology of a person, but also providing psychological assistance in a broad sense as a psychological consultant. And of course, I would like number two is that, of course, socio-psychological phenomenon is a good way to look at mediation, but the author it reduces her study by the category of subjective assessment of success and satisfaction, which is too narrow. And number three, the work has some stylistic stylistic drawbacks, which actually obscure the understanding of the text. For example, in the formulation of task 2 on page 7, it says to study social psychological features of professional activities of a mediator that are reflected in their individual personal characteristics. I think that the individual personal characteristics are manifested in the peculiarities of the professional activities, and but nevertheless, on the whole, the thesis of Uliana A and Udavikhina on the topic socio-psychological features of the professional activities of mediator complies with the main requirements of the procedure of awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, and Uliana A deserves the sought degree to be awarded to her. And since we are going to hear answers to these questions after all the reviews I read, and therefore I would like to turn to Timofey Alexandrovich Nestik. Colleagues, I would suggest, since you've been able to read my review, I will not read it in full. I will just focus on some key things, key points. Talking about the relevance, the issue addressed here is very important for psychological practice and in terms of the development of mediation as an academic field. For our society and the world at large, we need to face conflicts and negotiate solutions and adapt to contradictions, and especially in the context of new technologies appearing. And this is and therefore such studies are vital. Second, we are experiencing a personalization of service economy, including digital technologies, and that makes us as mediators adapt to this environment and psychologically, and we need some criteria that need to be applied to the assessment of our activities. And then the profession is changing in terms of age, and new conflicts are emerging. This creates new roles in a mediator, and well, again, this makes it important to how to account for the success of mediation and a mediator. And Udavikhina said about some commendable parts of the strengths of this dissertation, and that the author has done a lot of work, and I think of great interest is the differences between the image or the perception of members of the mediation themselves, and the perception of the mediator of them, and some drawbacks, of course. I would like to draw your attention to this. First, then the author analyzes the connection of preferred approaches and the subjective successfulness of the activities of mediators with their personal characteristics. But what lies at the foundation of this connection, or the socio-psychological mechanisms, are not formulated explicitly. Second, the author leaves out in the empirical study group and organizational factors of the successfulness of the activity of a mediator, and the preferred approach to mediation. The characteristics of organizational professional cultures, the degree of compartmentalization of or the regulation that operates in the mediator spheres, and the family, business, and the legal and the criminal law. And then number 3 is the analysis of these differences between the personal characteristics between mediator and the members and the participants of mediation are of great interest, but we should note that to identify professionally significant characteristics, it would be informative to compare mediators with professionals in close spheres, for example, negotiators or facilitators. Number 4, the author uses a questionnaire, the style of negotiations and mediation that is devised by the author and is prone to mathematical treatment. Well, it would be feasible to first test this questionnaire as a method, including testing the scales for internal cohesion and confirmatory factoring analysis and convergent validity. and the fifth one, the text says that to participate in the research, the participants in the research should have had practical experience or work as a mediator as a mediator, but there's no indication actually how these mediators were recruited and what other criteria were used. And because some characteristics such as the remuneration for mediation, or on the other hand non-remuneration, or this activity being part of a job description, this all have an impact on their work, mediators' work. And also we should look at the specializations of mediators, for example, in terms of different groups, family, education, business, criminal law, and also there's a mix of these. Nevertheless, all these critical remarks don't diminish the qualities of the dissertation, and therefore the thesis of Uliana and Udavikhina can be considered a complete research work, and it contains solutions of a scientific task. The dissertation of Uliana and Udavikhina on the topic the socio-psychological properties or features of the professional activities of a mediator conform to the requirements of the procedure of awarding academic degrees, St. Petersburg University, and therefore Uliana Andreevna Udavikhina deserves the third degree of kind of psychological sciences to be awarded to her. Thank you very much. Thank you. The next one for Alexander Nikolaevich Tatarko. Tatarko, yes. That's the light stress in the name. It's very important to read the name of the academic member. First of all, I would like to thank you first for allowing me to be part of this committee. I enjoyed reading the thesis. I will not read the whole review because it's been published, and just focus on some points. I will maybe reiterate and consider this work of high quality, and it tackles intergroup interaction and by closeness. Well, there's a problem. Another technical break needs to be because there's a problem with connection with one of the members of the dissertation committee. Technical break number 3 is announced. We're waiting. Continue. Please continue, Alexander Nicolaivic. And so it's it means that the success and conflict resolution in inter-ethnic conflict depends on the personal characteristics of the mediator. In conflict studies, you look at the professional characteristic of the mediator. In the socio-psychological issues are tackled, but not enough, and this dissertation fills the void and the gap. Well, it's taken a lot of time to write because this is a very difficult to find so many mediators for a study, and what I like as well is the big number of methods, original methods. I evaluate positively this because it's easier to use established methods instead of developing your own methods, and because you risk critical remarks. So jumping ahead a little bit, this original methods, the use of a methodology is a strength of this dissertation, and at the same time the weakness of this dissertation. Dissertation is characterized by originality and novelty because it treats socio-psychological phenomenon, mediation as that, and the author uses a systemic, comprehensive approach. It's very important for psychology because all the phenomena of psychic, mental, and psychological are in a system, and the author studied not only the mediators themselves, but also the clients as well, and this is very important. This is a very good addition to the in the realization of the systemic approach. Theoretically valid or substantiated model was developed, and the socio-psychological features of concrete socio-psychological features of mediating activities were identified. And so what is more important, as I said, is the context. Everything is in context taken. Although whether I positively endorse this work, but some drawbacks, of course, are there too. So my critical remarks there are 4 of them. The first one, the work has a theoretical part, but I would love to see a chapter at the end of the theoretical part in which the author would sum up the theoretical review and formulate theoretical foundations of the work, the approach that the approach to the study. Well, of course, this approach is there, but it's diffused and it's not formulated explicitly. And And I think that in the future, this is they can be rectified, and because works with such chapters look better and read better. Also, we already heard it that the methods of actually recruiting the samples are not described in detail, and how the author found the respondents, and how the mediators and people, the clients, were polled or surveyed, and what were the criteria of putting a respondent into the category of mediator. Number 3, the author uses many original methods developed by her, and this is good, but at the same time the work doesn't have information about the validity and the reliability of these methods. And number 4, on page 88 of the Russian version, it says we've put forward the hypothesis that mediators of different styles of mediation are different, and the level of emotional intellect it subscales. To prove this hypothesis, a correlation analysis provided in table 19 was performed, and so on. What I don't understand is that correlations are used to find connections, not differences, in order to find the differences in the parameters of emotional intellect of mediators of different styles. You must provide a comparison of the parameters of their emotional intellect, for example, on T criterion, or use the ANOVA technique, and therefore, nevertheless, the dissertation of Uliana Udavikhina is a completed work of science, and the author of the dissertation deserves the right to be awarded an academic degree of kind of psychological science in the degree field 5.3.5, Socio-psychology, political and economic psychology. Thank you. Thank you very much. The next one against the review is Professor of Tartu University, Kristi Koev, please.
It is a great pleasure and honor to be with you and to participate in the PhD defending process, who is giving an overview of the review report of the scientific degree of the candidate of psychological science submitted by Uliana Udavikhina. Now I should like to give some general comments, then go to the specific comments, and at last conclusions. Nowadays, mediation is applied in many different contexts and fields of research, and it is a valuable contribution to the psychological literature on stress in interesting and novel area of the dissertation study. Namely, the topic of thesis is current and relevant in the context of update research, as interesting theoretical and practical aspects with concentration on mediation as social and psychological process reflecting the inspiration from this thesis from both theoretical and methodological point of view. The thesis is the evidence of the deep theoretical knowledges and good orientation in the problem discussed in the thesis. Both parts of the dissertation, theoretical and empirical, contain original contribution to the field. In order to attain them, the author had to have a good command of the subject matter, both theoretically and in terms in empirical techniques for data collection and quantitative comprehensive analysis. No major criticism according to the overall quality of the work. I should like to move to the specific comments. First chapter contains of the literature review with 3 relevant sub-chapters analyzing the body of research on mediation as multidisciplinary phenomenon, concerning on the characteristics of mediator, and analyzing mainly contemporary research in the field of mediation in Russia. Where the last sub-chapter, by contrast, the first 2 sub-chapters is considerably less informative and gives the impression of less depth and analytical approach. The key broad concept mediation as a socio-psychological phenomenon is integrated and is described into the theoretical empirical background of the thesis, but raises a question why author uses at the glossary narrow definition of the mediation. The main part of the thesis, second chapter, is methodologically consisting of 2 sub-chapters. The aims are fulfilled, method of the research work are appropriate to the aims and hypotheses formulated in the thesis in general. The coverage of the development of the quantitative methodology and the research design is thoughtful and coherent. Nevertheless, concerning the methodological part of the thesis, I should like to make 2 comments. First, it would be useful to bring more attention to the use of one of the key terms, mediators and participants in mediation, because it seems that most parts of the thesis, the term mediators and their clients are used by author as synonyms. Secondly, the author succeed in connecting of 7 adapted and validated research methods as integrated whole for analysis of the research material, where one of the used research methods is called as a projective method, consisting open-end sentences. It raises a question, what is a conceptual framework for understanding projective techniques based on the methodology of this dissertation study? In general, the presented results reliable and well documented. I would like to emphasize that the dissertation study concerns a broad area of research, and their main value consists in the detailed description of the obtained results. Generally, the results are well presented and their interpretation is at a high scientific level. I really appreciate the candidate's expertise in the scientific field. The final section of the dissertation is well argumented summarizing the key contributions of the research and presenting some thoughtful reflection of the research process and future direction or for the work in this area. The author correctly highlights the contribution of the thesis, but notice its limitation is not included in the thesis. Therefore, it evokes a question during the academic defending process. Conclusions. In spite of the above-mentioned minor remarks of the academic discussion, this reviewed PhD thesis is clearly the result of a great deal of work, and the author demonstrates a good command of principles of scholarly work. The candidate contribution to the research and publications is sufficiently large and award her with candidate of science in psychology in the field of social psychology, political and economic psychology. Thank you.
Спасибо, Кристи. Ну и теперь заключительный отзыв на диссертационное исследование.
And the last review is by the chairperson. The more complex the life is, and the more competitive it is, the more challenges it presents to people, and therefore the relevance of the dissertation follows from that. Mediation is becoming a key to solving a lot of conflicts and personal and organizational, etc. Their work has a good theoretical value, and it turns to different types of work of the mediator, and I in terms of the presentation, there are a lot of tables, and it's very good because it makes the reading easy, and maybe with the exception of validization, everything is very, very good in terms of methods. The commendable part is that the comprehensive analysis of the sampling population was conducted. The work is original. The empirical part is studied based on the original methods, and the profiles were built of a mediator that used mediators do different approaches, and there are models of subjective successfulness and satisfaction, and the data of quantitative analysis. The theoretical significance is that the results are generalized, making them valuable contribution to the field, and I will drop the structure and publications remarks. I would like to state that it's a completed work, and it has new results, and the author formulates conclusions that are of scientific importance, and their drawbacks. There's a certain redundancy of the search of the links between the studied parameters. For example, the link between the connection between the subjective successfulness of mediation and the number of children. And number two, the author doesn't use the theory of attribution to explain the results of content analysis of the data, by the method of incomplete sentences when she talks about internal and external factors of the successfulness of mediators' activity. And the three, the dissertation has some punctuation and stylistic errors. This can be a good starting point for some even deeper research into the practice of mediation. And maybe you should, based on your analysis, you should rephrase your stating statements into the prognostic statements. And the dissertation of Uliana A. and Udavikhina on the topic, the social-psychological features of professional activities of a mediator, complies with the key requirements of the procedure of awarding academic degrees in St. Petersburg State University. And the candidate, Uliana Udavikhina, deserves the awarding of an academic degree of candidate psychological classes in the degree field 5.3.4, social psychology, political and economic psychology. The plagiarism clauses of the procedure are not violated. The chairperson of the dissertation committee, Professor Detector, please answer the questions of members of the Dissertation Council. I would like to thank all members of the Dissertation Committee for your close reading. I would like to now answer. Yelena Leonidovna, I would like to answer your questions. First, the primary source, you talked about the primary source. The primary source in this case was the works of Olga Viktorovna Al-Khverdova, who in her work Negotiations in Social Work on page 101 to 112 conducted a thorough substantive analysis of the provisions of this professional standard of the mediator in the context of their implementation in social work. Thus, in order to maintain the correctness of quoting, we used not the professional standard of the mediator as a prime source, but the work of Olga Viktorovna Al-Khverdova. Is it possible that in the case it was possible to use a double citation? The quote from the source of Husseinov and Stepan, the description of the principle enshrined in the Code of Mediators of Russia, is given as clarifying, revealing the meaning of the separate principle. Acceptance, respect, support of participants and mediation due to the insufficiency, in our opinion, of it in the text of the code itself. References to other authors when defining the broadest sense, the profession as of a lawyer, conflictologist, or psychologist are given by us in order to clarify views and the definition of these questions, as well as to emphasize their difference from the profession of the mediator. In terms of subjective, in terms of the satisfaction and the successfulness. Mediation is a rather close confidential process, therefore the design of an empirical study which would involve a detailed study of the conditions and dynamics of relations in the process of mediation was not possible to implement at the current stage of our study. It is also worth noting that the objectives of the study were not related to an objective assessment of the effectiveness of the mediator. It should be noted that this issue is a highly debatable topic in the professional community of mediators, and there's still no uniform criteria for the effectiveness of mediators' work. For example, are the signing of a mediation agreement and its execution of the parties to the conflict, a positive assessment of the participant, and many others mandatory mandatory criteria for effectiveness. In the course of mediation, the mediator and the parties to the conflict are interconnected. On the one hand, the subjective satisfaction of the participant in mediation may be lie in the satisfaction with the mediation process, the agreements reached, and the psychological comfort during mediation. It is very difficult to choose which one of them is the most important for determining the criteria for the effectiveness of mediation. Similarly, in the work of a mediator, there is a subjective assessment of their effectiveness, which can be associated with the number of mediation sessions held, the successful, in their opinion, of the completion of mediation, fulfillment by the parties of the conflict of occurrence, elaboration of the emotions of the mediation participant, and many others. Moreover, it should be noted that the assessment itself can vary significantly depending on the control point of its measurement. In the process of mediation, at the end of the mediation process, a month after the mediation, after the implementation of all agreements. As far as the so therefore we're based on the subjective assessment of both mediator and the client. As far as the stylistic errors, of course, and in terms of the what causes what, I would say that in terms of the professional individual characteristics, Roger Fisher and William Ury, in the book In the Way to Agreement and Negotiation Without Defeat, note that the higher the level of professionalism, experience, and amount of experience of the negotiators, the more the negotiators' personality traits are leveled. This approach is also supported by the work of Daniel Druckmann, Behavior Aspects of Negotiators on Mutual Security, who, based on experimental studies, concludes that the clearer the definition of roles of negotiation situation, the less likely it is that the personal factors, but non-national, will significantly influence the course of the negotiations. It is possible that the specificity of the mediator's professional activities manifests in the fact that strict adherence to the rules of mediation, a clear definition of the role of the mediator in the mediation process, the requirements of a certain mediation approach, the professional confidence and experience influence and correct the manifestation of the individual and personal characteristics of the mediator in the process of their work. However, people with certain individual personality characteristics do not choose to work as a mediator, which in the course of professional work begin to be is corrected. There can be professional deformation too. In support of the above, I also want to add that the experience of communicator with professional mediators who have extensive experience in conducting mediation shows that the specifics of the profession require the maximum leveling on the individual personal characteristics that may affect the observance of the principles of mediation. So you can continue and see, and then I will ask whether everybody is satisfied. Every reviewer is said. The next one, Timofey Alexandrovich. He first wants the relationship between preferred approaches and the subjective success of mediators' activities with their personal characteristics, but the socio-psychological mechanisms underlying this relation are not explicitly formulated. The mediator in their work tends to choose the closest mediation approach to them, which can be determined not only by personal characteristics, but also by educational and professional experience. The main socio-psychological mechanisms manifested in mediation are the mechanisms of communication, such as suggestion and persuasion, which the mediator uses depending on the limitations of the mediative approach, that they adhere to the criteria for the success of their activities on which they rely on their personal characteristics. For example, in more directive mediation approaches evaluative, the mediator has the right to actively express their assessment and opinion on the essence of the dispute, to convince the expertise of his her opinion, which brings them closer to the role of the arbitrator. In less directive approaches, the use of suggestion and persuasion may be regarded as undue pressure on the participants in the conflict. Second is the group. Question is about the group and organization factors of the success of mediators and their preferred approaches to mediators, that they remain outside the scope. Yes, characteristics of the organizational and professional culture, the degree of regulation of the activities of mediators in various fields are important group and organizational factors for the success of the professional activities of mediators. At the moment, their diversity is quite large, since the working conditions of mediators working in a state institution, in a private company, or an individual entrepreneur can differ significantly, as well as the degree of regulation of the activities of mediators differ not only in areas but also in requirements for document management in various organizations. The focus of our study was on the features of intrapersonal and interpersonal relations between mediators and participants in mediation. The study of group and intergroup relations in the professional activity of mediators is of great and practical importance in our further research. Number 3, and number 3, an analysis of differences in personal characteristics between mediators and participants in mediation is certainly of great interest, but it should be noted that in order to highlight professional significant characteristics, it would be more important to compare mediators with groups that are similar content, for example, with negotiators or facilitators. Unfortunately, we didn't have that aim. Characteristics of the organization of professional culture, degree of regulation, we didn't have that. We focused on their self-analysis, what the mediator assessed what is important for their success and for them. But this comment is very interesting, again, for our further research. Number 4, using the questionnaire, negotiation style and mediation. That's no internal validity and coherence data are provided. I think that in specialized methods don't exist in Russia, unfortunately, and therefore we devised our own questionnaires to fill this void, and the validity was tested in our publications, but in the future we should validate the validity of the methods, and in terms of the coherence, we don't have enough mediators to do that, because there should be 200 to 300 and over respondents in order to test the coherence, and I hope to do a larger study, and this will work. You also said that it's not clear how mediators were recruited and how clients were recruited. Well, the search for mediators was carried out personally by the dissertation student at scientific and practical conferences and seminars on conflict resolution and mediation, as well as by email to the contact database of the Mediation Service of St. Petersburg State Institution contact, an invitation through a profile on social networks, and an appeal to the professional community on social networks. The criteria for classifying a respondent as a mediator is the presence of a certificate of advanced training mediation basic course 220 hours with passing qualifying exams, work experience as a mediator for at least 3 months, as well as the number of cases resolved. Mediators were invited to participate in the study who conduct mediation officially as part of their official duties, which certainly match a monetary reward. Indeed, the presence of absence of monetary remuneration for working as a mediator, as well as the presence or absence of intermediary functions in official duties, may be important in building interpersonal relations between the mediator and the participant in mediation. Verification of this hypothesis was not included in the tasks of the current study. However, it is a promising direction for further work. Yes. As far as the specialization, additional criteria, when describing mediators by specialization, only those parameters were used for which statistically significant differences were found: age, number of children, income level, length of service and amount of work, the level of subjective success and satisfaction, the level of professional self-realization and work enthusiasm. But in order to compare, but it's a very promising avenue of further work as to compare mediators that differ in these criteria. And that's a very promising area. So we excluded those characteristics in which statistical differences were detected. Now I'd like to turn to the comments of Alexander Nicolaivic. I answered some of them because they were in other review. They said that probably there should have been another section to formulate the hypothesis. I think that yes, the work lacks such a section. The main hypothesis is that there are socio-psychological features of the professional activity of mediator manifested in different styles of mediation. It adheres to different approaches to mediation, the severity of emotional intelligence parameters, as well as the orientation of the personality and the personal relations of mediators and participants in mediation. They were formulated due to the limited socio-psychological research, which would study the features of interpersonal relations between mediators and participants in mediation. Most of the psychological studies of mediators were conducted only on a sample of acting or studying mediators, and this sample of participants in mediation was almost never affected due to the fact that mediation is a confidential procedure and the sample of respondents is difficult to access. As far as the types of how to test the hypothesis about different styles, we looked at our data using one-way ANOVA. We found that there were no discrepancies in the results. we confirmed the statistically significant difference between mediators of different styles of mediation in terms of the level of emotional intelligence are observed on the subscales understanding other people's emotions, managing other people's emotions, managing other people's emotions, as well as for the integral indicators interpersonal emotional intelligence and understanding one's own and others' emotions, and general index of emotional intelligence. Thus, the results using the Sheffer correction on the scales, understanding other people's emotion and others, were voiced. Then next, Christie's remarks, please. As far as, first of all, the narrow definition. Thank you for your comment. We have included the generally accepted definition of mediation adopted in the Russian psychological literature. Although within the framework of the work it is expanded and sounds like this, mediation also acts as a mechanism for resolving social intergroup conflicts. Mediation is a socio-psychological phenomenon as it includes the features of building specific interaction in a social group that is at a certain stage of development of the conflict and the process of developing group norms and the development of the conflict with its inherent group effects, psychological defenses. Indeed, it made sense to include it in the glossary. As far as the terms, in our work, mediation participants is synonymous with mediation clients. The use of the terms mediators and their clients is not entirely accurate, as it implies related samples of the mediator and those people who have approached them directly. The samples of mediators and participants in mediation were independent of each other, since the search for related samples would greatly complicate the study. Indeed, the synonym negotiators in the sense of mediators is not entirely accurate, since negotiators, in the strict sense of the term, defend the interests of their own or the side they represent, while the mediator is always a neutral person. The term respondents was probably used in connection with a not entirely adequate translation from Russian, where it is synonymous with the term interviews. As far as the conceptual basis for understanding the methodology. To understand this methodology, we borrowed the Sachs-Levy methodology, according to which the additive method, one of the types of projective methods, allows you to obtain information about various fragments of reality in the form in which they are perceived by the acting subjects themselves in the absence of any a priori schemes imposed on them. This approach is important in the study of the subtle issue of success factors, especially failure in the mediator's professional activities, as it allows minimizing socially desirable responses and bypassing psychological defenses. The combination of the structured questionnaires of a weakly formalized projective method made it possible to obtain a variety of results worthy of their addressing and future research. Thank you very much for your remark. Again, in the final session, you said that the limitations were not outlined. The main limitations of our study were not highlighted in the conclusions, but in the conclusions section, in which you mentioned, we said, for additional verification of the hypothesis and verification of the eternal consistency of the scales of a number of of the questionnaires, it is required to recruit a larger number of respondents, both mediators and mediation participants. Second, in addition, the study represents an independent sample of mediators and mediation participants. In the case of a study of dependent samples, the results of the study can be significantly expanded and supplemented. And third, only Russian citizens took part in the study, therefore the results can only be representative in of Russian reality. Perhaps in further studies in the section discussion of the results, we will pay more attention to the limitations of the study. Thank you. And Olga Sergeyevna's questions. The first one about the redundancy of finding connections between the parameters. Yes, indeed, looking for a connection between subjective success and the number of children may seem redundant. It was worth clarifying the rationale for searching for this connection with the specific specialization of the mediator, conflicts in the field of family relations. Since it is in this area that the presence or absence of children, their number, and the experience of their upbringing can affect the mediator's compliance with the principles of mediation, especially the principle of neutrality. For example, a woman mediator who has gone through a divorce and works with a married couple who are in the process of divorce may at some point feel a loss of neutrality due to empathy, psychological attachment to the woman, the party to the conflict. One part of the loss of neutrality is one of the main criteria for subjective failure, which are identified by practicing mediators based on the results of our study. As far as the attribution in explaining the results of content analysis, considering the results of data content analysis using the unfinished sentences method on the internal and external reasons for the success failure of the mediator's activities, the following can be noted. There is a possibility of such a phenomenon as inflated self-esteem. That is, mediators tend to present themselves in a favorable light and consider success at work the result of their abilities and efforts. According to the theory of causal attribution, in this case, failure should have been explained by the influence of exclusively external factors, lack of time, personal qualities of mediation participants, and so on. While we have received results that go beyond the theory of causal attribution. For example, mediators explain the failure of mediation by the specifics of their personality traits. And this happened in 61% cases. And no compliance by the mediator with the principle of mediation occurred in almost 63% of cases. So that's why we didn't use that theory. As far as the punctuation and stylistic errors, I totally accept the blame for them. I will be more careful later. As I understand, I've completed my answers. Yeah. Well, there were some suggestions, but they were suggestions, not questions. I would like to thank you for the recommendations, and they will help me improve my work in the future. Dear colleagues, members of the Dissertation Committee, are you all satisfied with the answers, or do you have any constraints and any further? I agree with the answers, and I'm satisfied. I'm also satisfied. Thank you. Are you satisfied? Yes. Thank you. Then we are giving the floor to anyone willing to speak up. Anyone who is not member of the Dissertation Committee, not more than 2 minutes per statement. No one is willing. Okay, in the room. Therefore, there are no external questions. Have received nothing by email. Then during the course of our work. Therefore, we can go on and turn to the pleasant part of the. You can take a seat, the candidate, as the academic advisor. Could you say a few words about the candidate and how the work proceeded? Please take the microphone. That microphone over there. This one is also okay. Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. That's the work of socio-psychological work of the mediator. I would like to say, as an academic advisor, is the personal characteristic, personal traits of Uliana A, how this reflected in the work. First, as a creative approach that manifests itself in building a unique sampling, in which she managed to persuade professionals and their clients to answer questions, and also she overcame the difficulty of the lack of methods in this field, and it's very positive, and she's managed to create her own techniques. During her work, Uliana Andreevna has proven to be a very laborious, industrious, and independent young researcher. And besides these very important personality traits, I would like to highlight even more valuable is the modesty and respectfulness towards colleagues, and the quality, the work of this quality has taken a lot of time. It could have not been done in a shorter amount of time, and because this is a very systematic work, and now it's come out as a very elegant work. I would like to thank all the positive remarks and the close attention to the work, and I would like to wish Uliana Andreevna success in her future research. Thank you. Thank you very much. The last chance. Anyone willing to say anything from the members of the Dissertation Committee? No. Okay, last chance. And you voiced your positive comments and negative comments. Therefore, the discussion is over at this point, and therefore we are in for the final stage is discussing a resolution, and before that, and then voting, and I must ask you a question. Are there any problems with the procedure of the defense and the technology of it? Are you satisfied with the procedure? I have no critical remarks. Alexander Nicolaivic? No critical remarks. Christy? No. No critical remarks. I have no critical remarks either. What about the canon? No critical remarks. No. As to the procedure, no. No critical remarks. Then we can turn to the next item is voting. And the question here is to all members of the Dissertation Committee, do we need, before we vote, behind closed doors deliberation time when the broadcast is switched off, etc.? Do we need such a break? If we need it, then if we don't, we'll start voting. Now, you have to say, do we need such a break? I don't need such a break. Alexander Nicolaivic, do you need such a break? No, I don't. Timofey Alexandrovich, do you need a break like this? No, it's redundant. And Christy?
Yeah.
No. Kristikov? No. She believes we don't. Very good. Do you understand correctly, Christy? We don't need a break.
Yes.
Do you understand correctly? Good. Then the discussion is not necessary of the verdict. And so we continue our session, and the next thing is open roll call voting. So every member of the Dissertation Committee should say out loud their opinion, how they vote. This is 15:56 Moscow time, and we're starting our voting. We can hear everyone and see everyone. So I put to the vote the resolution to award Uliana Andreevna Udavikhina a candidate of sciences degree in psychological sciences in the degree field the social psychology, political and economic psychology for an open roll call vote. To remind you that when you vote in favor, you agree with this statement. It's clause number 11, that the author of the dissertation must cite authors or sources of where they found materials or specific results, individual results, and all the research works that have been done previously by the author themselves should be cited as well. So the decision in favor, the positive decision is deemed legitimate if not fewer than 2/3 of the dissertation. Not fewer than 3 members can vote in favor. Elena Leonidovna, I consider the applicant to be worthy of the third degree. And Timofey Alexandrovich, your opinion? I vote in favor. Alexander Nikolaevich Tatarko, your opinion? My opinion has not changed. Is in my review. I vote again for it. Member the Kristikov, member of the committee. What's your opinion? I agree.
Да. Вот немножко слышимость плохая, но я услышала. Спасибо.
I understood. Yeah. Thank you. And we are counting the votes. And therefore, we have all voiced your opinions. I would like to, of course, I vote in favor. I am member number 5 of the, chairperson of the committee, vote in favor of awarding the third degree. And therefore, by counting the votes, I can announce that 5 members of the Dissertation Committee voted in favor of awarding the third degree to Udavikhina Uliana Andreevna of a candidate of sciences in psychology. So the verdict is positive. The decision is made, and therefore the concluded statement of the candidate. I would like to thank deeply all the mediators. Some of them are present in the room, and my dissertation advisor, and also my colleague from the Department of Psychology department, and all members of the dissertation committee for your time and attention to my work and valuable recommendations that I will use in my future work. Thank you very much. And therefore, we can now congratulate the candidate on the successful defense. The session is therefore declared closed. We thank everyone's participation, and the broadcast now can be switched off. Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues.